Hey everyone, let's take a look at some of the swimming material that you're going to be required to know for the PE Wellness 2 unit. Um, Quick look at the different types of kicks. There are 4 different kicks that you need to know. You need to be familiar with which ones go with which different types of swim strokes, as well as which ones are best for treading water, which ones should not be used for treading water, and so forth. And we're going to kind of review that here within this video. We're also going to review the survival skills that you've been taught in the last 2 years. So the ones in white print are the ones that you learned in your freshman swimming units, and the two that are highlighted there in yellow, the survival travel and disrobing, those were skills that you were taught in this current unit we are in for PE2. For swim strokes, we've reviewed quite a bit: freestyle, backstroke, elementary backstroke, and you have also learned side stroke and breaststroke. Um, which ones are resting strokes? We're going to get into that a lot more here in the video, but basically, elementary backstroke, side stroke, and breaststroke are all resting strokes, and there's a lot that they have in common. We'll get into that a little bit more. Some basic safety guidelines that we don't necessarily always talk about, but some things I want to make sure that you are aware of and hold some very much importance is number one is always making sure that you have life jackets or life preservers or PFDs available to you. If you're not a real strong swimmer and you are in a large body of water, to make sure that you do have a life jacket on, not just with you, but you should have one on, especially in a larger body of water. If you were to um, get tossed overboard for whatever reason, accidents, lots of things could happen. Make sure that you have a life preserver on so that you are not at risk. Here's a good one is it kind of seems like common sense. It's one of those things that a lot of people will just kind of overlook, and that's not to swim alone. It really doesn't matter how strong of a swimmer you are. You could be an Olympic caliber swimmer, but you should never swim alone. Lots of unusual things can happen. You could start choking, you could get a muscle cramp, you could even have a stroke. Things that we don't necessarily think of can happen, and when you're in water, it just kind of exacerbates the issue. If you were doing the workout on a certain type of workout on land, obviously it's still going to be a little bit of an issue if you're all by yourself. But when you're in water, it becomes more of a life or death situation if you become injured or ill while swimming. So always swim when you are in a supervised area. You never want to drink alcohol or use drugs when you're swimming because they greatly impair your judgment. That's your cognitive judgment, but even more importantly, they also impair your physical abilities. Where you think that you are a pretty good swimmer, or maybe you are a pretty good swimmer, but the drugs or alcohol can actually affect your body's ability to withstand endurance types of work like swimming, and you can get out into deep water and misjudge your abilities. So very important not to use those when you're swimming, um, or at all since you're underage. But the other thing that's really important is that you always want to know what the depth of the water is that you're going into. Not so much that you need to know the exact depth, but knowing if it's some place that you can dive into or not dive into. The only time you should ever dive is if you are going into a pool and it's clear water and you know the exact depth. You should never dive into a lake. You should never dive into an ocean unless you can really see, because there could be logs hiding underneath. There could be rocks hiding underneath. It may be shallower than you think. Very frequent occurrence for young individuals to jump off of a boat, dive off of a boat, and I personally have known a few instances where individuals have become paralyzed or have died as a result of that. So very important to make sure that you always know the depth of the water that you're entering, especially if you're in an area where you cannot see the bottom, whether it's a murky bottom or whatever. So you should always enter feet first. Make sure you know your swimming limits. You know better than anybody what you're capable of doing and making sure that you stay within those limits. Chewing gum or eating while you're swimming can be very dangerous because it's very easy to choke. And again, because you're in water, it makes it a little bit more of an issue. You start to choke on land. You can usually get a little bit of help a little easier, but when you're in the water and you're choking, now you're trying to keep yourself afloat while you're also trying to not choke. So very important not to do that. Um, Other important thing to keep in mind is always know what the local forecast is for weather, and not to get out in the middle of a lake when you know there's a storm coming, because obviously lightning and water do not mix. So keep in mind your current forecast to keep yourself safe. So looking at the different types of kicks that we use in swimming, we have the whip kick, flutter kick, scissor kick, and the egg beater kick. Of those four kicks, the only kick that is not used in a swim stroke is the egg beater kick. That is more of a treading based kick, and it is, although it can be very efficient in keeping you level in the water and keeping you upright in the water, it is kind of a energy consuming skill, and it takes some practice to get a little bit better at it. So not an ideal kick to use for treading, but it can be. And then the whip kick and the scissor kick are directly related to treading, but they also have swim strokes attached to them. And the flutter kick is only used in swim strokes. So the flutter kick looks like this. Kick comes from the hip, toes are pointed, and ankles are kind of flopping as you are kicking. That should be really small, hard, fast kicks. The whip kick is also known as the breaststroke kick or frog kick. And as you can see in the video of the individual who is treading water using the whip kick, you are going to bring your knees up. Ankles should be flexed, toes pointed out, and then you're going to bring your legs out in kind of like an arc or a circular motion. Okay, so this is the whip kick. The scissor kick is kind of a stroke that you can use a kick that you can use in side stroke. As you can see, the individual on the far right, it could also be a stroke in this individual right here. So both knees are coming up, one leg goes forward, one leg goes behind, as he's kicking. And this individual is switching which leg he's kicking with interchangeably here, but that's not necessary, and that's not necessarily a requirement. So again, a kick that you can use for treading and can also be used for a swim stroke. So the next kick is the egg beater kick, and this is a kick that is really only used for treading, primarily used by those who are doing like synchronized swimming or water polo, as it's a little bit more of a complicated type of kick. As you listen to this next video, you'll get a little bit better idea of how this kick is actually used and some of the specifics of the kick.
The treading water figure of eight kick is sometimes referred to as the egg beater kick as well. A highly effective combination of each leg working with each other in order to generate that upward force, keeping your head, potentially your shoulders, above the water. With each leg working alternately, it generates a constant upward force for your body in order to stay buoyant and lifted. Although highly effective, treading water is also highly energy inefficient. Here's also how to tread water with using this figure of eight kick and the arms to assist. As with most things, the more this is practiced, not only the better the technique is likely to become, but also the fitness levels enabled to sustain treading water for longer will also be improved.
So now we're going to talk about some of the swim strokes that are both new to you from this unit and old, as in you learned them in your freshman unit. The first one is freestyle. This is the pretty much the most basic stroke. As you can see, there's lots of muscles getting involved in freestyle, which makes it a great form of cardiovascular exercise, as well as muscle and strength work. Um, The individual is rolling to his side to take his breath, which is the way we should be doing this. Faces down in the water as we're swimming, reaching out nice and far with the arm out in front of the head, and then pulling the arm down and back to kind of push yourself through the water. The legs are using a flutter kick with the toes pointed and the ankles kind of floppy as kind of like flippers. And the kick is initiating from the hip and very little movement at the knee, but there is some movement, but the majority of the kick should be coming from the hip. Now, this particular individual is using what's called rotary breathing. The other form of breathing would be bilateral, which means instead of taking a breath every other stroke, you would take a breath every 3 strokes. So the more efficient you get at your stroke and the better you are at your breathing technique, the more cardiovascular exercise you can get out of this particular type of swim. The other stroke that we participated in during this unit is the backstroke. Looks very similar to the freestyle as far as body position and the kick. Similar arm movements, except that you are not in a prone position for this one. You're actually laying with your back towards the bottom of the pool. And if you'll notice, the kick looks exactly the same as the freestyle stroke, but the arm strokes are a little bit different. So you can see that the swimmer is rotating side to side, just like you do in freestyle. As his arm is coming up out of the water, he is leading with his thumb, and then he's entering his pinky into the water as he pushes the water down to push himself forward. Now we're going to talk about the resting strokes. So next we are going to talk about the resting strokes. The first resting stroke we're going to talk about is elementary backstroke. We reviewed this for a few days, but basically this is a resting stroke that uses the whip kick. And as the legs are in the whip kick motion, the arms are doing the monkey airplane soldier. So as the knees are bending in the whip kick, the arms are coming up along the sides up towards the armpits in the monkey position. As the ankles are flexed and toes are pointed out and moving towards that out position, the arms move into the airplane position. And then as the feet come together and the legs whip back together, that is when the arms come down along the body into a soldier position, initiating the glide. So all resting strokes will have this in common in that all motions are done underwater. There is a glide phase to the stroke, and there is a scrunch phase to the stroke. So next, we're going to watch a video of someone actually doing the elementary backstroke, and you can see those motions and see the glide. The next stroke we are going to discuss is the side stroke. The side stroke has a lot of advantages to it. It can be used quite frequently, actually, in lifeguarding situations and rescue situations. Again, this is a resting stroke. All motions are going to be done underwater. There is a glide phase and there is a scrunch phase. This particular stroke is going to use the scissor kick. The video following here will show you the specifics of the stroke and kind of give you some good pointers and tips on this stroke.
All right, the side stroke is the second stroke you can practice when preparing for assessment selection. This stroke is a free breathing movement. It is a lot less dynamic. However, it can be a much slower stroke. There are a few individuals that can be a lot more efficient in this stroke. The biggest part is being streamlined. My suggestion when utilizing this stroke is once you become exhausted utilizing the breaststroke, you would transition to the side stroke because again, it is a free breathing movement. You can catch your breath, you can think about what you need to do and get your body back in sync and then transition back into the breaststroke and finish up whatever evolution you're executing. The big focus in this stroke is your legs because again, your legs are going to be your power. So when executing your legs in this stroke, that top leg that's closest to the surface of the water, that is the one you want to bring up to your chest. So you're going to bring that knee up to your chest. That bottom leg, you're going to bring it back and then you're simply going to collapse them in a scissor motion as hard as you can. When collapsing them, do not let your feet pass each other because you're going to create that drag. Collapse your feet on top of each other, and that'll keep you streamlined from your lower body. Once you execute that kick, your hands are going to be at your chest, tight into your body. So once you execute that kick and your legs collapse together, your bottom arm is going to shoot out in the direction that you're swimming. Your palm will be flat to the surface of the water. You don't want to have it perpendicular to the surface of the water because that can cause you to go off in different directions or do an S motion in the water, which will make your swim a lot longer. Now that top hand, you're simply going to bring it down and collapse it on that top leg, and this is going to keep your entire body in a streamlined fashion.
The last resting stroke is the breaststroke. Again, everything underwater, glide phase, scrunch phase. As you can see in both of these demonstrations, the individual is using a whip kick. There is a little bit of a different timing to this stroke as compared to some of the others where it looks like you're all scrunched up at once. The body should be out in a full extension for the glide portion of the stroke. The arms are pulling kind of like in a heart shape, or like we talked about in class, scraping the cookie dough bowl, bringing it to the mouth, and then extending out. As the arms are pulling, that is when the head comes up, takes the breath, extend out, and on the extension of the arms, that's when the whip kick takes place. So it's pull, breath, kick. Pull, breath, kick. Now we're going to get into the survival skills. One of the most common survival skills is treading. Keep in mind, although this is a survival skill, this is something that is a very short-term skill. You're going to use your hands in a sculling motion, and you want to use one of the 3 kicks here listed below, which is the whip kick, scissor kick, or the egg beater kick. You do not want to use the flutter kick when you are treading. So the next survival skill is survival float. This is what you learned when you were in your freshman unit. This is also known in Navy SEALs as drown proofing, but basically this is going to be a skill that you're going to use when there's no land visible. So you're in a large body of water and all you see on all sides of you is water. You cannot see any land. You would only do this in warm water, meaning if you are in the middle of winter, you would not want to use this skill because you are not moving and you are trying to conserve energy, which means that you would get cold a whole lot faster. So survival float is something you can use to survive for long, long periods of time out in the water, but it is something that you would need to use only in warm water. Your main concept here is trying to conserve energy until someone can rescue you, someone can find you. Very important to stay nice and relaxed when doing this skill.
When it comes to long-term water survival scenarios, you can only tread water for so long. That's why we teach a skill called drown proofing and prone float. In a turbid, open water environment, you may have random wave action crashing over your face. So you protect your face by laying face down in the water and then will to breathe at an interval that's comfortable for you. As you can see, Petty Officer Pasquale is face down in the water, using his hands to scull and supplementing with a modified frog kick. The key is staying calm and demonstrating proper breath control, and you can sustain a longer period of time.
Survival float is kind of the precursor to the survival travel. And survival travel is when you are in a large body of water and you do see land, but that land is so far away that you're not going to be able to swim to it. It's way too far. We're talking miles away. That it's visible, but not close enough that you would be able to swim. So we would still want to try to conserve energy by doing the float. The only difference here is when we would take that arm movement to come up and take a breath, as soon as we put our face back down in the water, we would do an inverted scissor kick. Inverted meaning we're facing the bottom of the lake or the ocean, and you're going to do one big kick just to kind of propel you a little bit forward. You're not swimming, you're not moving fast, you're actually going quite slow, but this is to slowly get you towards land until you are either close enough that you can swim if you have the energy, or that you can get yourself to land by doing the skill the entire way. So again, trying to conserve energy, warm water only. The only difference from the travel is that, I'm sorry, from the float is that land is visible with the survival travel. Next skill is the reaching assist. This is where we would want to reach some sort of an object or item out to an individual who's struggling. We'll call the victim in the water. Remember, at no cost should you ever jump into the water to try to rescue someone, as that is how many times the rescuer also ends up drowning with the victim, because the victim will try to jump onto the rescuer to get themselves up above the surface of the water, and in doing so, end up pushing down the rescuer. So unless you are in a life preserver, getting into the water should be your absolute last resort. We will want to try to reach something out to the victim if they are close enough to us. You could use, as you can see in the picture, they're using a noodle, you could use a towel, you could use a rope, you could use a stick, pretty much anything you can get your hands onto that you would be able to reach out. Two different techniques. The first technique, the two kids there in the top picture, you can see they're laying on their belly so that they don't get pulled into the pool to help rescue their friends. The other stance is the one we practice in class in your freshman class anyway, and that is having your knees, being down on your knees and being in a staggered stance. Either way, however you pull the victim in, you want to make sure that you're pulling hand over hand and that you are talking to them the entire time, trying to keep them comfortable, let them know that you're there to help them, tell them exactly what to do, because remember, they're going to be in a state of panic. Now, the throwing assist is very similar to the reaching assist. The only difference is the victim is too far out for you to be able to reach something to them. So what you're going to do is get a hold of something like a rope, tie something onto it, whether you have a buoy, readily available to you, or there's something that you can kind of concoct with like a rope and a life preserver, whatever you could possibly get to throw out to them. But what you're going to try to do is throw the rope beyond the victim so that the life preserver actually goes over their head and you pull it right to them. You want to make sure that you keep one foot on the end of the rope, again, either in a kneeling or standing stance, but you need to be in a staggered position so your body weight is balanced. Pull the victim in hand over hand, and again, make sure that you are talking to the victim the entire time to try to help keep them calm. The PFD compact jump you may remember from freshman year. For some of you, I know it might have been a little bit more of a traumatic experience if you're a little bit afraid of heights. But the importance of this particular skill is to teach you how to enter the water safely if you have to do so from a high point. This particular skill, if you recall, is you are wearing a PFD, a personal flotation device. You will pinch your nose so that you keep the water from going up the nose with one hand. You take the opposite hand and you're going to hug your body and the arm that is holding the nose. As you step off of the board or cliff or boat or whatever it might be, you are going to cross your legs and point your toes. So the idea is as you enter the water, you are as straight as a pencil and your toes are basically the sharpened lead point of the pencil, and you want to enter as straight as you can to try to keep from having your limbs get away from you and possibly get injured. So the next skill is disrobing. This is one of my favorite skills to teach as well as help you to get successful at. But the disrobing comes in two parts. The first part is getting the shirt, and this is being able to get the air inflated into the shirt. There's a couple of different techniques. You're going to see one technique in a video here shortly, and one technique is to especially for those of you that maybe aren't as good as swimmers. The one technique that tends to work the best is putting the shirt collar over your mouth, making sure that your nose is not blocked, and inhaling in your nose and exhaling out through your mouth. The key here is to make sure that there's no openings around the collar of the shirt so that it is nice and tight around the neck so the air cannot escape.
What's going on, guys? This is another Black Scout quick tip. This quick tip is on how to make your shirt into a flotation device. This is a Marine Corps water survival technique, and essentially it's used to keep you afloat. Marines are amphibious, so we're on ships, we're on reconnaissance crafts, and this just gives us a ability to stay afloat in case we do wind up in the ocean. This technique, you're going to use your shirt, cami blouse, whatever it may be, and you need something tightly woven so it holds that air in. You need it to be wet, you know, to make sure it holds that air in. But what we're going to do for this technique is we're going to take and roll your collar in. This will help you seal in that oxygen. You're going to take a deep breath. You're going to go into water and blow your air into one shoulder. Then you're going to seal and hold that off on your neck, closing and sealing that off your neck. You're going to take another breath, come to the surface, take another breath, and blow into the other shoulder. Then you're going to pinch that off and hold it, trying to retain as much air as you can, and then hold the stomach of the shirt or blouse down as well. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate that for you. So I got it pinched off, going to hold that stomach down, and now you can see I'm floating. So for this technique, I'm going to go ahead and make sure the shoulders stay wet, and just keep splashing water so they don't dry out and release that oxygen. But anyhow, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you subscribe to our channel because we put out a few new videos every week. And as always, thanks for watching.
So the last skill is the disrobing using the pants. And you're going to watch a video here shortly of military individuals and how they do this training. But basically what you're going to do is use your pants, get them into a flotation device by getting air into them. And you can start by doing this by tying the ankles of the pants together either individually, or you can tie the two pant legs together. You're going to open up the waistband, you're going to zip them up, button them, open up the waistband, put it up back over your head, slap the waistband down on top of the water and cinch the pants closed, hopefully getting enough air and water into the pants at that point that you're able to float on them. There's a couple other variations where you can kind of hold the pants out to the side and splash water and air into them to get enough air and water into them. You can also hold the pants after you do the initial slap down. If you can't get enough air into them, go underwater and hold the waistband of the pants and blow air up into the pants. Either of these methods work. It's really kind of whatever works best for you and whatever you find easiest in being able to complete the skill. But this disrobing skills with the shirt and the pants are something that can really save your life if you were to be stranded someplace, and being able to know how to use your clothes to float on.
This is a Black Scout quick tip. This quick tip is on how to make your pants into a flotation device. This technique is taught to all basically trained Marines, and in 1995, Lance Corporal Zachary Mayo fell off his ship overboard into the Pacific Ocean, where he survived for 36 hours using this technique until he was rescued. Let's go over the technique. All right, now, for what you're gonna do for this technique is to obviously take your trousers off. You're gonna tie your bottom of your legs into a square knot. You're then going to take the waist of your trousers and swing it over your head to capture as much air as you possibly can. At that point, your trousers are going to be inflated. You're going to take the knot and put it at the back of your neck. Then hold the waist of your pants and you'll stay afloat. Just make sure you keep your trouser legs wet. Don't let them get dry because you will sink. But this was another Black Scout quick tip. Thanks for watching.